instead of building a business, you can discover a business. The awesomeness of the product does not depend on your belief system. It depends on the market reaction to it. Now, this does not take 10 minutes. This is a lot of thinking and then a lot of experimenting, because once you find a niche, you need to go out and find people to talk to. And that means you need scale. And scale is either expensive or difficult, or it takes a long time, or all three. Targeting indie hackers is very, very challenging. But it's the default for most indie hackers, because that's what we know.
Eli, thank you so much for coming on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, John. I'm doing good. How are you?
Very well, very well. I'm excited to be back in the studio with a guest like yourself who's very experienced and has a lot of big ideas about startups and marketing. First question is pretty big, and I apologize in advance for that. But you wrote on your pinned tweet in April of this year, quote, "The goal seems to be freedom, although what that means changes over time," end quote. So to give our listeners a little bit of context about who you are, what you're doing, what iteration of freedom are you working on right now, and what does that work look like?
That's a great question, because freedom has been kind of a guiding principle for me for a very long time. Right now, it seems to be about financial freedom, I think, for the most part, for myself and for the people who I help. But before that, I kind of mentioned in the tweet that it changes over time. The previous iteration of freedom, or one of the previous iterations, was about emotional freedom, was about the freedom to feel whatever it is that I'm feeling, which was that was a major shift in my life. Just, there's anger, there's sadness, there's anxiety, there's fear, there's all these things. And culturally, we're not really permitted to feel these things. We're not really permitted to express these things, especially men. And it was a major shift for me to just allow myself to be with whatever I was feeling. That was one phase. Another phase was my wife and I were exploring this, like, what does freedom look like in the context of being, married and having kids? Because kids are almost like a anti-freedom, which I should have thought about a little more before we had kids. I didn't know back then that freedom was what I was looking for as a primary thing. The latest iteration of freedom is a freedom of kind of the intensity that money brings into our lives. There's this sense that I think a lot of the people share, that money is scarce, that there's not enough of it, that we need to work really hard to make it, that we need to struggle, that it's kind of that kind of struggle where you scramble up a sand dune and then you slide back down and then you struggle again, and it's just not enough of it. And I've been reading over the years about, these ideas that there's actually an abundance of money. There's lots of people in the world, lots of companies in the world who have too much money, that are looking to either invest money or to spend money. And somehow the people that I hang out with, or used to hang out with maybe more, and definitely the person that I was, that seemed to be completely ridiculous. Like, what do you mean? Everybody's struggling. The economy is tanking. Like, no one's making enough money. Everybody's talking about how prices are going up. What does it mean that there is an abundance of money? And I just figured that out, I think, finally clicked for me, I think maybe a couple of months ago. Professionals, software developers, doctors, lawyers, massage therapists, never experience an abundance of money, because we know how to do a thing and we're looking for someone to pay us to do that thing, but we don't know how to sell ourselves. So we are forced to work for someone else who knows how to sell us, who knows how to sell our services. These people usually charge a premium. And I've been kind of dancing around this marketing, sales topic. My background is in software development. I did it for about 25 years, so this was a big transition. But about 2 or 3 months ago, I finally figured out how sales works. not marketing, sales. This idea that you can have a conversation with a person and walk away with them being happy and you being happy, where they got a service or a product and you got some money for it. When that clicked, I had a profound shift of my entire perspective. Because if you can sell, if you can have a conversation with a person, figure out what they need, and then figure out a way to provide them what they need, and they are happily paying you money, then suddenly money becomes abundant. It still requires work. It's not like it just, falls out of nowhere. But money is an exchange of value between people, and if you figure out how this dynamic, how this relationship works between people, suddenly, yes, and there's no difference. Like a conversation where you make $2,000 or $200 or $20 or $2 million is kind of very similar. It's just different people with different needs, and maybe you're at a different stage, but they don't actually differ that much. So that's my kind of current iteration of freedom, to circle back to your question.
Okay. I think there's a lot there to unpack, but the thing that stuck out to me that I assume that a lot of people are struggling with is when you said, if you can have that conversation with the right people that need your service, right? And I think that's the blocker that a lot of founders struggle with. So maybe we can get into that from a marketing perspective, but if you want to share any ideas around getting that person on the phone that you need to talk to.
Yeah, that's true. For most engineers, for most founders, the process is usually we come up with an idea based on our own experience, the scratch and itch kind of way. There's something that we find that's missing in the world, that's lacking in the world, that we want to build, that we want to bring in. Then with that idea, we go out into the world. Now, first-time founders usually start building it, build a landing page, then come out into the world and then look for people. Slightly more experienced people start with an idea and go out and try to find people to talk to about this idea. But in both cases, the idea arises kind of in our minds, and then we're looking for the right people to talk to about this idea. And then you stumble on this problem. Well, how do I find these people to talk about this idea that I've come up with in my own mind? And that's obviously difficult, because since you've come up with the idea in your own mind, how do you find people who are thinking the same thoughts? And when you do find people who are thinking the same thoughts, aren't they thinking about building this as well? Because almost by definition, if they're kind of like you, they're also builders. And that creates this perpetual cycle where founders sell to other founders courses on how to sell to founders, because getting out of that cycle is difficult because we don't know other people. So there are basically two approaches here. One is this: you come up with an idea and then you look for people, and I'll give an answer. Like, there is an answer on how to do that. It's not that there's no way to do that. It's just difficult. The other is something that I've noticed recently, that instead of building a business, you can discover a business. You can talk to people, like, you and I may have a conversation after this call, and I'll ask you a few questions about what's going on, and we may discover something that I could help you with that neither of us knew beforehand. But let's go back to the first option, where we have a product or we have an idea for a product, and now we're looking for people to talk to. When we build a product, I have this two-way radio here that I used to communicate with my wife upstairs. I'm in the basement, and we use this. So this thing has features. Communicates over a certain distance. It has certain volume. You can switch channels. It has like a call function. It has a list of features. And when we build a product, usually that's what we have in our minds. We have like, what does it do? The next step beyond that is like, well, what is it for? Well, it is for, talking to people over a distance. But that doesn't help you find people because, there are so many ways and reasons for people to talk over distances. So that doesn't help. It's only when you focus on something specific, on a specific use case, a specific scenario where this is useful, then you can start to look for people who might be interested in this. So again, I'm on purpose taking something that's not a piece of software, it's just on my desk, to see how, like, let's say I do have this thing and I want to find people, not necessarily even to sell to them, but just to have a conversation to figure out how it would fit in their lives. I still need some kind of hypothesis. So first hypothesis is some kind of emergency situation. There's a fire, there's a flood, there's I don't know, a hurricane. You need to communicate with people who are far away. The cell service is down, something like that. That would be one hypothesis. Another hypothesis is you go to the beach and you let your kids or your teenagers run around, and you want to maintain some sort of contact. A completely different hypothesis, a very different image, and a very different set of people who would do that. People going on like multiple people going on a hike. You know, there's the first person, there's the last person. They need to communicate, again, a very different group of people. But the cool thing about this is if you focus on one of these use cases, you can start to see, oh, we can actually find people who do these things. So for example, if you focus on the last example, on the hikers, if you want to talk about two-way radios to hikers, you go to hiking forums or to hiking meetups, or you just go for a hike, you know, on a popular trail and just meet people naturally to have a conversation about two-way radios in that scenario, which is very different from going into disaster zones and having conversations with, you know, rescue workers there who need two-way radios for a completely different reason. So my point is, there is no place where you can go to talk to people about two-way radios in general. It doesn't, except for people who are building two-way radios, which is not what you're looking for. So if you use that as a metaphor or translate it to software, then, you know, like a couple of years, maybe 3 years ago, there was a flood of these Twitter scheduling tools. Like everybody was building a Twitter scheduling tool, which was really nice for a while, until Twitter kind of went in a different direction.
Until the price went.
The price,
to
yes.
What, 40,000
a month? Yes, until that. And also Twitter stopped being a valid marketing channel, I think, because the engagement dynamics changed. But anyway, there were lots of people building that. So let's just take that as an example. So you build a Twitter engagement tool. Where do you go to find people who need a Twitter engagement tool? Well, Twitter, right? But no, that's not the point, because if you go on Twitter, that kind of depends on the size of your audience, and it depends on already having an audience of people who would like that kind of thing. So you're kind of, that's a catch-22. Because you can't start building an audience when you have a product. That takes like a couple of years. So if you have an audience, that's awesome. If you don't, okay, what do you do? And again, you need to look at the specific circumstances and reasons why people would want to have a Twitter engagement or Twitter scheduling tool. And when you look at the reasons, just even hypothetically, even just thinking about it, who would want it? So obviously, you know, indie hackers, build-in public people, but also PR agencies, large marketing agencies, assistants for high-profile people, people who run presidential campaigns. All of these things are different from each other. These people hang out at different places. They think in different ways. They need different scale. Eventually, they even need different features. So when you focus on a particular specific use case, it doesn't mean that, you know, you build a Twitter scheduling tool and you go after presidential campaigns in South America. It doesn't mean that you will find your product market fit there, but you might be able to. Or at the very least, you could say, I tried that niche and it's not there. Let me take a look at another one. Because going broadly just never works. But if you go into specific these narrow use cases, these narrow niches, you have a chance.
Right. All right. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. And you wrote a post just a couple days ago on your Substack. I'll put a link in the show notes to that. It's called Where is the Money? And you described this discovery process that you mentioned. So you place a very high priority on researching and deeply understanding your target market or clients before you offer the service or product, right?
Yeah,
So
by
this makes
necessity.
sense. This, yeah, this makes sense. I'm with you. But what do you say to those founders who might be listening, who are out there right now and they're saying, Ellie, I don't have time for this. I've got an awesome product with an MVP with this cool AI integration, and AI tools are going nuts. Apple's trying to kill us before we can even launch. I need to get to the market right now, and I don't have a huge following. What do I do?
You're in a bit of a pickle.
Yeah.
Because it's like saying, I want a kid now, but I'm not even in a relationship. Right? It's like, let's for a woman in particular, I want to have children, and I don't have anybody to have children with. How can I get there quickly? You can't. You can't get there quickly. Even if you switch from natural birth and conception to adoption, you can't move things quickly. That's one thing. The other thing, you believe you have an awesome product. You don't actually have an awesome
Well, of
product.
course.
No, you don't actually have an awesome product because the awesomeness of the product does not depend on your belief system. It depends on the market reaction to it, or at least that's half of it. There are plenty of amazingly built products that are in the market are utter failures because it's too early, or it's too late, or it's the wrong angle, or it's the wrong words, or it's the wrong niche, or whatever. It's the awesomeness of the product is in the match between what's in your head and what's out there, which is true for the awesomeness of life in general. Like it is when what we have in our heads meets favorably what's out there in the universe, in the world, then awesome things happen. Otherwise, we just live in our heads. So there is no shortcut, but there is a system. Every, I don't know, 6 months or so, I run a boot camp for marketing where I teach this system. And the idea is actually pretty simple, and it's a version of what I was talking about so far. You take your product, you break it down into its features. Then you take the features and you figure out what the potential benefits could be for each of these features, like we were talking about the walkie-talkie. Then you look at the scenarios where these benefits might be relevant, which allows you to figure out what kind of use cases and what kind of niches you could approach. Then you figure out where these people hang out. And look, we're not like this does not take 10 minutes. This is a lot of thinking and then a lot of experimenting, because once you find a niche, you need to go out and find people to talk to. You can often do this on social media, and there are some techniques where you can actually get people to engage with you and not just push them a product, because you're trying to understand what their problems are, and you actually need to set aside whatever you've built mentally to be able to have these conversations. Otherwise, you're just showing screenshots. And then people will tell you what they need. And if you listen well enough, you will be able to do these micro pivots of moving your product or the way you talk about your product or the features in the direction people are actually asking for. And then you start to kind of recompose your product around what people actually need. And in many cases, if you build 15 features, one of them might be worth 10 times more than everything else, and you actually need to take things out. There's a process, but it's not like it doesn't happen in a weekend. It doesn't usually happen in a month either.
Yes. All right. You've built your own product, though, and I want to talk about that a little bit and what you learned from that experience. So it was an app, as far as I understand, right?
My product was a
and
failure. I can talk about that.
Right. I don't want to focus on the failure, but I do want to sort of focus on what you learned from that process and how it's informed this framework that you use now.
I followed the same exact process. I have, or not the one I'm describing, but the one founders usually do. I had a magical idea, or at least I thought it was magical. I thought I was going to cure depression for everybody because it helped me heal from depression. Like this is freaking awesome. Let's do this. Left my job. This was in COVID, and like, okay, let's do marketing. Let's just get it into the hands of people. And it turned out that I'm a fairly unique person, and I was uniquely positioned to be able to make use of the app in the way that I envisioned it. I spent 18 months trying to find the right people for it. I did everything. I wrote, I was on Reddit all the time. I built an audience on Twitter. I spent quite a bit of my money on ads. I bundled it up with coaching, with support, with community, with whatever. It just didn't click. The thing that I learned is this, is that we need to step away from what we've built and go look for problems. Now, we're not looking for just any kind of problem. We're looking for something that's adjacent, which is kind of close enough to the product that we've built. But we still need to change our focus to do that.
That's a little bit surprising to hear, honestly, because when I think about the context of that time when you launched, it feels like that would be a good time for a software based app that would help with depression
Wouldn't it?
for people that are stuck at home, have family members that are possibly dying or seriously ill from a new pandemic that's threatening mankind. I mean, it
seems
seems
perfect,
like
right?
the breeding ground.
You're right.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
was there were a few moments where it seemed like it would take off. There was I think it was in 21 where there was a big outbreak in India. I was kind of deep into it and pretty frustrated that the app wasn't going. And I noticed both a need and an opportunity. I'm like, okay, there's something going on here. I could help. And I did have, like, I don't know, a few thousand people, maybe even, I don't remember, maybe even 10,000 people use it at like a point. But once they came once, they tried it, maybe it made them feel a little better, and then they went away. And also, India is not a market where you can sell anything in any kind of reasonable way. That took me a long time to realize that not all markets are the same. And in general, you asked me about the lesson. This was a B2C product, like selling to consumers. And oh my God, selling to consumers is so difficult because you need tremendous, like, you know, we're all transitioning from employment to entrepreneurship. And as people, or I think most people who are listening here and to this, and almost every indie hacker is like that, as employees, the only products we encounter are products that are B2C. So our model of what a product, what an app is like, you know, Netflix, Twitter, Spotify, things of tremendous scale, things that only work at tremendous scale, and things that usually lose money for a very, very long time before they make any money. So these are VC-backed companies, and this is what we see. So when we come, and also the problems that we have are consumer problems. So the problems that we naturally solve are consumer problems, and the examples that we see are of other people solving consumer problems, only we don't see the first steps. We see them 2 or 3 years later when they're massively successful. So we try to copy the absolutely wrong things. What we never see as employees are tiny, high cost, expensive, high value, simple products that businesses use. It is very rare for an indie hacker to encounter something that replaced a spreadsheet that costs $600 a month. There are many, many products like that. But it is extremely rare for an indie hacker or a developer who is becoming an entrepreneur to just encounter anything like that. But these products and these businesses are much easier to build, much easier to sell because they solve a problem. Consumer products usually don't solve problems. They just help us spend time better.
Distract
Something like
ourselves.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
In general, it's crazy, but people in a consumer mindset, in an employment mindset, we don't spend money to fix problems. That's just not like, we pay money if we can't fix it ourselves. Basically, if you take your car to a garage, you do that because most people do that because they can't fix it themselves. If they could, they would. But you don't
Mhm.
you don't think of, oh, my house is dirty, let me pay somebody to clean it. Most people don't think that way. Or I'm not sleeping well enough. Let me hire a coach to help me with like my sleep patterns. Most people just don't think it that way because most people don't experience that level of abundance of money. They earn a fixed paycheck and then they need to split it between these different things. Business is different. Business people are like, well, I need money to solve a problem. I don't have the money. Let me borrow some money because when I solve this problem, I will make more money. It's a completely different
Mhm.
dynamic, which is why selling to businesses is so much easier than selling to consumers. And you don't need as much scale. So I think if you're asking me what the main lesson is like as a solopreneur with no funding, B2C is just playing the game on super hard mode.
Okay, that leads me to another question that's kind of related. So, the classic advice for technical people who want to build a product is go find somebody who already knows sales and marketing. Make sure you can work with that person,
Partner up.
establish a relationship, and partner up and become a co founding team. Find somebody else to design the thing, and you're off to the races. So, that still works, right?
It does, but with a caveat. First of all, engineers and marketing people rarely get along. It is just very difficult to bridge the gap in perception. It is difficult for the same reason that it's difficult for engineers to learn marketing. Or sales. It's such a different world. Marketing and sales people wave their hands almost by definition of their job with no basis. So the basic idea of good marketing and good sales is that you do that before you have a product. That is incomprehensible to an engineer. So you get all these clashes. The sales partner sells something. It's like, well, how could you sell this? I didn't build it yet. Like, well, and now we're scrambling to deliver and all that. The other thing is that in a partnership in general, like an equal kind of partnership, a 50-50 split, everything is slower. It's supposed to make things go faster, but because of the discussion and the differences and the decision and the negotiation between the partners, everything is much slower. And the third thing is I personally have one partner, my wife, and I can't take any more partnerships of that depth. Like a business partnership is a partnership of that depth. It requires a lot of investment in just managing the relationship.
Mhm.
So it is a good advice in general for people who want to work together. I'm a loner. I don't like to work together. So for me, I tried multiple times over my career to partner up with people. It was always difficult. And it's especially difficult if you don't have a clear separation of responsibilities.
Yeah. All right. A little bit more about the indie sort of bubble that you've described, and then we'll move on to some things about marketing. You said several times already in this conversation, but elsewhere in your Substack, that you can't build a business for these cool indie hackers because you're not going to make enough money for a variety of reasons. But at the same time, there's sort of an endless refrain from people like Paul Graham and other VC folks that we need more founders, we need more startups. And so my question here is, do you think that this audience will ever get big enough to actually be a good audience to build for? Or will they always just be like too cash strapped? Like if I want to build for early stage founders, I'm only going to build for early stage founders that already raised a seed round and have a bunch of money to burn for my solution.
I think the audience is going to grow exponentially. It's going to be huge. That's not the problem. It's not the number of people who are building startups that's the problem. The problem is that this is fundamentally a consumer market. This is not a business market because these people are not business people and they don't think as business people. I've talked to hundreds of indie hackers over the last few years and ended up offering help with them figuring out marketing and sales. And one of the common objections that I've heard, the most common objections that I've heard, my business is not making enough money for me to invest in whatever, coaching, consulting, outsourcing, whatever. And my question is always, well, do you have any savings? Like, of course I have savings, but I wouldn't spend them on the business.
Scarcity
Exactly. Not
mindset,
just
right?
scarcity mindset. It's debt was kind of invented, or specifically the limited liability concept was invented in order for business people to take on debt to then invest into something that creates more value than the debt, repay the debt, and have some cash and capital left as a result. This is the fundamental process of the market system of capitalism. And if you are an employee and you are in that mindset and you take a loan to buy a car, but you never take a loan to invest in a risky business, then you're not actually participating in that game. And indie hackers, for the most part, are not there yet. And those who get there actually start to make massive progress. Because then you can suddenly use this, like either your savings or some debt or some other people's money to an extent to increase your rate of progress, to buy some services, to get some training, to buy an expensive course, to do things that help you move. So that's the
Mm.
reason. I think that in order to have a successful product that targets indie hackers, in many cases, you actually need funding. You actually need VC funding to do that because it's a consumer product. And I think the more the bigger this space becomes. And I think indie hacking, kind of as a term, is a little bit dead. But with or it's not as popular, let's say. But
Yeah.
I think solopreneurs or like micro businesses will flourish, and AI will unlock a lot of ability for people to do that. But the dynamic where these same people would not spend hundreds of dollars on anything, and would kind of you would offer them a SaaS or some kind of service that costs $20 or $25 a month, and they would say, "Oh, I don't know, that's kind of expensive." That dynamic will remain, and that means you need scale. And scale is either expensive or difficult, or it takes a long time, or usually all three. So targeting indie hackers is very, very challenging. But it's the default for most indie hackers, because that's what we know.
Yeah, it's familiar, right? You're selling to people like
Yeah.
yourself,
Well, but you are,
right? So
you,
it's
you are so many things. You're a guy, you're a certain age, you're a dad, you have kids, you live in a certain country, you have certain experiences, you work out. Like there's so many things that we are, but all
right.
of these things are consumer things. None of these
Hmm.
things are business things.
Okay. I'm just pausing there because it seems like the narrative among, at least among successful ones, is very much business focused, right? It's about MRR. It's about this is what I launched and this is my tool stack that's so cheap to maintain my products. So my profit is fantastic, right? A lot of the narrative that is produced by this circle of people is quite business
Yeah.
focused. So I'm struggling to connect that with
that
your idea of these are
these
consumers
people. Oh, okay.
market.
Someone who has $20,000 MRR or $50,000 MRR or something like that, they're no longer consumers. So the leaders of the indie hacker community are business people. They usually have multiple streams of income. They usually have multiple investments. They definitely hire people to help them do their job. They definitely diversify and do all these kind of businessy things. Um, have a balance sheet and think of money as a source of energy, not as a scarce thing, but as something that you're going to get and then you put into something else and then you extend it. I'm not talking about these people. These people are 1 in 10,000. Like we all
Mm.
know the 4, 5, 6 names of these people that we're talking about. That's not indie hacking. Indie hacking, for the most part, is between $0 and $100 MRR. Most people
Mm.
struggle there. Most people can't leave their jobs to become full-time indie hackers. And it's gotten harder over time because the people, we're talking about here, they started 5, 6, 7 years ago when it was new, when nobody knew what they were doing. and they grew with the movement. So trying to replicate
Mm-hmm.
what they did back then, many things. My first startup almost 20 years ago, we put up a web page that just described the tool we built. It was like a software testing tool. And people just came because the internet was smaller back then. Google worked in a different way, and it's just kind of worked. Not that we succeeded that much, but that piece of it, like people were getting to you put a website these days, you put a landing page, you get zero traffic, like literally zero. Even if you put a lot of effort into SEO, you get a little more than zero. It's a different world.
Indeed. Speaking of the different world, this is a perfect segue. You mentioned how you sort of spent a lot of time trying to figure out marketing on Reddit. And now that Reddit is the number one search result for any question you put in Google, I think a lot of people would love to know some of your learnings from marketing on Reddit. I am trying to do it more frequently these days with an offer that we're doing with the Clipwing team and having mixed results. So yeah, I'd love to hear what you think works on Reddit these
Okay.
days.
Well, the first thing I want to preempt my answer with is I am, if I am an expert on anything, then I am an expert on things that don't scale. If you ask me how to get 5,000 users, I can't tell you, but I can tell you how to get the first 10 or 15 and how to make sure they're paying. So that's just the underlying idea. So nothing that I will tell you about how to do things on Reddit scales at all, but it does work. Reddit, as you know, and I think anybody who has ever tried to do anything marketing is toxic to promotion. It is really toxic. And I consider it a badge of honor that I was banned from, I think, 3 or 4 subreddits while I was trying to figure that out. It is actually a necessary experience. As you try things out, you will get banned. And if you haven't, that means you're too cautious. So that's just the basic idea. But if instead of thinking about marketing, you would think about helping people and figuring out how what you've built or what you're thinking of building could be helpful, then things start to fall into place. The beauty of Reddit is that there is a community for every topic, every niche, every fetish, everything. Like there's just it's crazy. So we talked early in the conversation about the way to select a use case or a niche. And with this niche hypothesis, you usually can find a subreddit that exists. Maybe it's more alive, maybe it's a little more dormant, but there usually is something. And you need to go and have conversations with these people, but not about the things you want to talk about, about the things that they want to talk about. So when you come into a subreddit, and the rules usually kind of almost enforce that, you need to respond to posts, to comments, you need to react to people. Now, for a person who's trying to promote their product, there's just no patience to do that. I just want to tell people about my product, and they will come, and I would just want to put my link there so they would click. We're impatient.
You're literally describing the instructions I received just a few days ago. So yes, I'm there.
So, but it doesn't end there. So you start by the classic instruction is you go in, you find posts, you have something to contribute to, and then you contribute something. That's a tricky thing. Like, what can you as a software engineer contribute to a subreddit that dentists hang out at? And my usual answer is you can become the go-to tech person in a subreddit. If the people you're targeting are not tech people, you can become the tech person, not on the topic of your app, but just anything that smells even remotely like tech, or in any way, shape, or form. Because these are questions you can answer. Oh, I tried this on the browser and in the app, and it didn't. Like some kind of frustration, and you just give some help with that. I have a client who's done that on a Shopify forum for a while, which the people on Shopify are not technical. And every time they stumbled on a bug or something that didn't work, he would go out and do his research and figure out what was going on, and would post a kind of a nice long explanation of what was going on and how to work around that. And this does a few interesting things. If the subreddit is not too big, by the way, this works in forums, on Discord groups, like anywhere. If it's not too big a group, and you do 2, 3, 4 responses like this a day for a couple of weeks, you become a fixture. You become recognizable as this helpful guy who always, or girl, who always has these, on a particular topic, has these insightful things to say. In some cases, people even start to refer others to you. Like someone would ask a question, oh, you should ask this guy, you should ask John, he seems to know about this. And this is fairly predictable. I've done this in 3 or 4 subreddits. I've taught people how to do this who have done this in other subreddits. It is not a lot of effort. So building an audience on Twitter takes about a year, maybe longer. Creating that level of traction in a subreddit on Reddit takes a couple of weeks. That's it. It's not, yeah, go ahead.
I'm just trying to compare the paths, because what I see in Twitter is, okay, John is the guy to answer. So if you did the same thing, right? You became known as the guy who talks about making great podcast interviews, right? And in your Twitter bio, you've got the handle for your podcast and you've got your website. So then when somebody asks a question about podcasts, they say, oh, ask John can help with this. He does a great job with Ship It and Sip It. And they
But John,
tag you.
this
And
it's diluted.
Like,
It's homeopathic.
right.
It's like you're on
No,
Twitter.
Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is the path from like the person to the profile to the website seems much shorter on Twitter. And what I see on Reddit is like almost
There's no profile in it.
reviews.
Yeah, you're right.
People barely put
Yeah.
it. No,
No, the path is different, and
So-
I think
so-
on Twitter that doesn't work as well
Yeah.
as we'd hope either. But for a different
No.
reason. On Twitter, in order for you to be recognized as a key person on a topic, you need many thousands of followers, usually like 20, 30, 40,000 of followers, because it is one conversation. It's very diluted. In a subreddit that has 100 people online at a given time, which is pretty common for like a subreddit with 200,000 people, there's a very small niche group of people who are actually active there, and an even smaller group of people who give decent responses. So standing out there is really easy. There might be like a couple dozen people who actually consistently respond to messages. So standing out, just making an impact in the sense that people will recognize you, that's easy. But wait a second, that's not the end of it. Because people don't click on your profile to see what you do to then click onto your web. No, we're just step 1. And like I said, this does not scale. So the key here is that you would want to turn these conversations from a public conversation where you respond to comments and they respond to you. You want to take this into DMs. Now, almost all subreddits forbid you from doing that. You can't tell somebody in public, oh, let's chat about that in DM. You'll get banned. It's called...
But you can just DM them.
That you can do. But you can only do that if the conversation in public gets to a point where that makes sense. Because the other person, you want to kind of fit where the connection is. So you can't do that after one comment. You need to exchange 3, 4 comments. You basically have a conversation in public, and then it becomes inconvenient. It's just from a UX perspective. It's just inconvenient to have a long conversation and comments with a person about a topic that is very specific to them. It also becomes uncomfortable because suddenly either party needs to share something that's just uncomfortable to share in public. And it's just weird. So then when that weirdness comes up, is like you go into DM, it's like, hey, do you want to keep talking about this here? That just seems like a completely natural thing to do. And it is natural. It is a natural just experience of communication with people. There's nothing, we're not marketing. You've been helpful there, and now you're helpful here to have a conversation. And when you're talking in DMs, again, according to my approach, you still don't mention your product. That's the hardest thing. You don't mention your product, you don't put a link to your product, you don't offer your product. This needs to be, you actually need to wait You need to figure out, you only offer your product or send a link when they say, oh, wouldn't it be lovely if something like that existed? They need to open the door, because if they don't open the door, if you shove your product too early, they may report you to the moderators and you'll get banned. So it's not a bad idea to kind of experiment with the right timing, but yes, you're taking the risk. And when you're in DMs, your goal is to get them on a call. Because in DMs, there are two styles of conversation. One is it's like a chat. Like you're both online, you're exchanging messages, you're both like 90% attention on that conversation. It's quick, it's short messages. That's cool, that's a conversation, you can get somewhere with it. But in many cases, you responded, they respond 24 hours later, it's like pigeon mail. So you want to turn that into something more active. And you need a reason to get on a call, in the same way that you needed a reason to get into DMs. So in the DM conversation, you need to figure out what that reason would be, which is typically you helping them with something that they need, that you can help in a conversation. Not with your product, with your expertise, with your knowledge, with your skill, with your background, with whatever. And then you get on a call. You see, this is like, I said it's doable. I did not say it's easy or there's little skill in it.
I struggle to see a large amount of people who have the patience for this, honestly.
That's why business is hard. All
right, what else can we do? All right, one example, we decided to post some of our blog content on Reddit. And the first time I tried it, I edited it a little bit, but it was still a fairly long post, probably 2,000 plus words. Slapped it on Reddit, and it got, I don't know, 15,000, 17,000 impressions. A lot of good conversation. Cool. Worked reasonably well. Yeah, didn't get banned from the subreddit. Didn't mention the product, didn't put a link in it, put some other links in it. Went back after 3 or 4 days, put the CTA at the bottom of the original post and put the link in, but by that time the traffic was way down. Yeah. Basically got the long tail keyword for that SERP, cool, though, which is now the Reddit post and instead of our blog post, of course. But tried it with another post a couple days later, nothing happened. One comment, couple hundred views.
Yeah. So obviously if you post something, so first of all, on some subreddits you can't even post anything before you commented a bunch. But let's say you did enough and you kind of have enough karma to just post. If you post something, it has a random chance of succeeding. And like you said, you posted one thing, it worked, and then another thing completely didn't work, and you don't know what the reason. There is one way that I found that is fairly consistent in generating posts that do get traction. And it piggybacks on kind of writing comments. So if you do this writing comment thing, and you don't go to DMs, and you don't talk to people in DMs, and you don't go kind of the sales direction, you just post comments. Once in a while, one of those comments gets a little traction. So what I usually do, I go into a subreddit, I sort by newest, or usually by newest, and I respond to people who haven't had responses yet. And some of these posts some of these original top line posts get traction, and your first comment, if it's good, gets traction as well, just through the nature of engagement. And then if your comment got traction, got upvotes, I don't know, 10, 15 upvotes, 7 upvotes, whatever, some kind of indicator that what you said there resonates with some people on the subreddit, you can take that comment, expand it into, like, add a little more heft to it, and post it as a top line post. If you also manage to give it a good title, there is a really high chance that it will do well. The reason for that is you've already pre-validated that this angle, this point of view that you have, this idea you have already resonates with some people on the subreddit. And that, it's not predictable in the sense that you can get 100% success, but it is predictable that about 1/3 of the posts that you do that way will get some traction. Maybe not like 15,000 views. But I have about 14,000 karma on Reddit, and almost all of it came from that.
All right, let's go back and talk about your discovery journey, which you've been on recently. And you've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole into agencies, which fascinates me because I work at an agency. I've seen this circle that's like agencies are sick of depending on prices per hour. They want to launch their own products. Sometimes that works, more often that doesn't work. Devs want to get out of agency life and getting paid by the hour for their skills. They want to launch their own products. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't work. Then they realize that productized agencies are a thing, and that's really popular now. So it's this whole circle that's going on that I've seen. What's your take on this situation, and what are you doing now in this space that you're excited about?
Well, first of all, I came to realize that an agency is an actual business, whereas a startup isn't. It is limited in the fact that an agency sells, work for or time for money, and it is difficult to scale. But fundamentally, an agency provides a service for a fee for someone who actually needs that service. A startup is a guess, is a bet, until such time that it becomes a business. So that's the first my first realization, the reason I'm focusing on agencies a little more right now. As for the productized service thing, the problem is not, so agency owners approach it from a direction, oh, I would love to have a repeatable stream of income. Oh, I would love to not sell my time for money. I would love to step away. I would love to work fewer hours, and so on and so forth. What I haven't seen anywhere is, why would people buy a subscription to an agency? Why would the customers prefer a subscription model versus a kind of on-demand model? And the interesting thing is that it deeply clashes with this subscription fatigue from SaaS that is also talked a lot about. So I don't know the answer to that. I'm pretty sure there are circumstances where a subscription or retainer model is a good idea for the clients, but I don't know what the circumstances are for that, because I haven't actually explored that. But the thing is, I don't think the agencies who are switching to a subscription model have explored that either. They haven't figured out, oh, what my clients are asking me for is a subscription model. Let me give them a subscription model. That's not the direction it works. It's like, I want a subscription model. And who knows? It's the same thing. It's the same scratch your itch kind of thing. I want this, and now I have a problem of finding people who want to buy this. Well, of course you have a problem. You did not come up with this business idea because the demand was there and people were telling you, you know what, I prefer to pay you for 20 hours every month, regardless of whether you actually do 20 hours of work. I actually prefer, this is better for me financially, and it gives me predictability. Like, no one has said that. Or maybe people have, but I haven't heard that.
Okay, yeah. I haven't heard that either. But I was just thinking of a hypothetical that seems relatively realistic. So say a founder comes to us at our product agency and they say, I want to launch my MVP. I need a developer. All right, so they come with this idea that they just need one engineer and that will solve their problems. Right, and so how much does your developer cost? And we come back and we do the whole discovery process, the whole pre-sale process where we come back with a scope and say, and a proposal and say, look, you don't just need an engineer, you actually need, one full-time engineer, a half-time QA, a half-time designer, and a half-time BA to meet your goal of launching this MVP within the next 2 months. So if that person came to us and the offer was simply, this is the price to launch your MVP and it's the same amount of time, this is the full cost, this is the productized service, would that be better, worse, and different?
I don't know. So it does point to something that I missed in my description earlier, that there are kind of two types of productized services. I focused on the subscription model, but there's a different model. There's like a build an MVP kind of productized service, which is like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, and it will build an MVP of a certain level of quality for you. That second model seems to be more grounded in reality. Like there seem to be a lot of founders floating around that are looking to build an MVP and are comparing on price, and that they would like to know the final price. And this reminds me of this. There's this two pockets metaphor that I've been using. We all have two pockets. In one pocket, we have the monthly revenue or income we have. And subscriptions and kind of monthly things come out of that pocket. We have the other pocket, which is whatever investment we have, or as a consumer, whatever savings we have. And things that are one time come out of that pocket. Now the sensitivity to these pockets is different between people. Some people have a lot of savings but no income. Other people have income but zero savings, and depending on that, they would allocate their expenses. We need to understand who we're dealing with. So for the subscription model, or kind of the retainer model, you're looking for people with a lot of revenue. Maybe not a lot of assets, maybe not an investment, but a lot of revenue. On the other hand, if you're selling for example, you said one developer, half a designer, half a QA, and whatever, like 1/3 of a business analyst, that goes into kind of the monthly bucket or the monthly pocket, and companies that have monthly income. So these are companies. So for example, an agency that wants to build the product and for some reason they can't use their own people to do that, they outsource that, they have revenue, they have excess revenue, they can use that to pay a monthly fee to have this group of people build something for them. If you do a product that is fixed price, that comes out of a different pocket. This is a person or a business who has a certain budget, a certain amount of money they can spend, and that's it. And that's why they want it to be capped. Like, this is what we can spend. They can't say, oh, let's start at $5,000 a month and see where we get in 6 months. Like, I don't know how to align that with the fact that my pocket is limited.
Interesting. All right. Do you want to say more about what you're thinking in terms of the product or service around the agency space?
Turns out that agency people, like all other developers, just don't want to sell and don't want to do marketing. They would prefer, that's what I've heard from the people I've talked to, they would prefer for it to happen somehow magically. They're willing to part with a portion, sometimes a large portion of their revenue, in order for clients to just end up at their door knocking, hello, sir, can you build me a thing for $10,000?
This goes back to the beginning of our conversation when I said if there are people on the call, right? So yeah, they're willing to pay.
Yeah.
They'll talk to people, right? We'll talk to people, but we want that list
that's ready
of people
to talk
that's ready to talk.
ready to pay, not just kind of leads that you need to warm them up and go through this long, arduous process of getting them to a point where they would spend anything, but people who actually have like a need. And I resisted this for a very long time because I can sell. I just really don't like to sell for other people. Like, I've built this to sell my services, not other people's services. But the signal is so strong, I can't quite ignore it. Here's what I'm thinking, and we'll see if this works out. In order for me to be able to deliver, a consistent stream of clients to an agency, I need to know what kind of clients they need. And I need to know what kind of clients they would be the perfect match for. So I need to really, really understand what this agency is good at. So I need to explore and understand what kind of projects they've done. And again, I keep talking about niches and I keep talking about focus. Usually when an agency has done 10, 12, 15, 30 projects, somewhere in there is something that looks like a niche. Either a few projects that are similar, or a vertical they ended up in, or some kind of referral network they tapped into. There's something there, there's some signal. It's not all random. It usually looks random until you kind of look at it closely. And I was talking to an agency last week, and they had like 5 or 6 big projects, 5 big projects. 4 of them were completely random, and one of them was like, oh my God, this is completely repeatable. You can find as many people like that as you want. There's just like an abundance of them. So it's like, okay, this is a niche. And so what I'm probably going to offer is some kind of package where we figure this thing out. Look at the projects, interview the clients, get all of that well understood, get a good niche hypothesis figured out, and then based on that, I can go and find more people like that and create a steady stream of clients for an agency. If this works, then it's going to be a really nice business for everyone involved.
Awesome. Well, where should folks follow and read or watch what Eli is creating?
If I find you, I'll reach out to you. You don't find me. We're not there yet. That's a scaling thing that we're not doing yet. I'm on Twitter. It's Finer Eli. And on Twitter, I post about everything that I do. It's not just the tech stuff, it's just the personal stuff, the evolution of marriage, the parenting stuff that I'm thinking about. It's all there, and there's a link to my newsletter, which is kind of similar, just longer form. That's it. Everything else is kind of like a sideshow. I got a little YouTube channel, but I post everything that I do on Twitter. So if you follow me and the algorithm provides, which doesn't always work, you'll see it.
Right. Okay, and are you still going to keep going with the boot camps that you mentioned?
The current iteration that I'm working on is going to be a video course based on the last boot camp, or maybe the last 2 boot camps. And I was thinking about this last night. It's either going to be a free video course, like there's like 20 hours of content there. But I'm thinking it's either going to be a free video course and maybe like a community or a mastermind on top of that that's a product, or some permutation of that. But honestly, I taught that bootcamp 6 times, and the last time from my perspective was perfect, and I kind of feel bored to teach it again. I want to do something else. I want to use the videos so that people would watch the videos of the content that I already taught and do like a weekly or bi-weekly Q&A or something like that. I'm not a course creator, I'm not a content creator, but I do aspire to be one. So this is the year it's happening. We'll see how it goes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Eli.
Thank you, John.
It's been a delightful conversation, and I hope that future founders who find it hopefully will learn quite a bit from it as well.
Questions and reflection. Thank you.